Okay, hey everybody, it is 4:01 on July 10th here on the Eastern United States. I know we have people from all over, so various different times, but I'm going to go ahead and get started. We are here today in our kickoff series for the webinar, and today's is called What Harvard Taught Me, but My Kids Made Me Learn. My name is Bea Wray, and I am just over the moon excited to be a part of this launch and a part of this day. And I've chosen it as the way to celebrate my 50th birthday. So thank you so much for being part of my celebration and being part of our conversation. Let's continue on. So welcome. When I talk about what Harvard taught me, but my kids made me learn, there's a essence of what I'm trying to say is that business is indeed done with people, so people skills matter. And that's what we're going to talk about, is how is that relevant in business? And for me, the message is that parenting can be a breakthrough for, not necessarily just a break from your career. I'm very blessed that that's how it played out for me. I was able to sell a company and take 6 years off, live on a bridgeless island called the Fusky Island. It's literally right next to heaven. And when I had this time alone with my children and went back to work, I was scared. And I had thought that I had lost all of my skills. And I thought, how am I going to do this? And how am I going to have these conversations? And what's interesting is it was at that time that my career took off. And I found that I was more efficient, I was more effective, I was more impactful. I was able to receive feedback from a great number of people that were just thanking me for making this connection or creating an event or helping them find funding or providing advice. And I kept asking the question, well, what did I do to help? And how did I do that thing? And where did I get that skill? And the answer was always from being a mom. So we're going to talk about that and what that looked like for me. So what do we expect in our conversation today? I will talk about some entrepreneurial lessons. I will talk about people insights, and I will talk about business teachings. Certainly we'll do some talk about parenting. What I'm expecting from you is that you look just like this beautiful woman and her very happy smile. I'm so grateful to her. This picture was actually taken when I was giving a boot camp a couple weeks ago in Atlanta, and what a gift she has given to me. I am not going to assume that she is laughing at my fashion flaws, but rather that hopefully I said something engaging or fun or interesting. But I'm so grateful for her smile, and I don't get the chance to see the camera on you today, but I'm going to imagine you with that smile and engaged all along the way. And for whom? So who should be or is or could be listening here? And what we have, it's really, this conversation is targeted towards business executives, to entrepreneurs, and certainly to parents. From home. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. I did attend the Harvard Business School. I was able to, I'm coming up on my 20th anniversary, so time to start planning the reunion, and that means I graduated in 1999. This was a very incredible time to graduate as the dot-com boom and then bust was just taking off. This was the year where Harvard MBAs were sought after for consulting gigs, and we could eat all the lobster we wanted because they couldn't get enough people to go to Wall Street or into consulting, because everyone was heading out to, mostly to Silicon Valley, but certain areas of Boston and Texas to go start companies. So really incredible experience to be there, great learning, still very, very close. As a matter of fact, it was just yesterday that I was in charge of submitting my Section J notes for the kind of a magazine that comes out, you know, who's doing what. And so great network, great learning. But I think in particular, being able to go at that time offered me a great number of lessons. And one is, I have friends that have experienced plenty of failure, personal failure, professional failure. and other friends who have literally made hundreds of millions of dollars, bought professional sports teams, etc., because it was such a time of great risk and great reward. So that's been fun for me to see. And interestingly enough, there is not, not to belittle the accomplishments of some, but what I love witnessing is that the people who were 100 times more successful on paper are not 100 times smarter or 100 times more hardworking. Those things matter, but so do so many other things in life. And so we're going to talk about a little bit of that. So I'm the founder of several companies. The one I've mentioned here is Source Harbor, because that was the company that allowed me the greatest exit. I talked a little bit about that. I did end up having 6 years to be sort of out of the business day-to-day world, and that was because we were able to sell a company. A lot of people are interested in this story, not because I sold the company, but because of some of the challenges along the way. This was a place where at the time we had $4,000 worth of revenue. That's it. And at that point, a $1.8 billion company spent $500,000 suing my company because we were, in quotes, air quotes, putting them out of business. So what I share that with you because I know what it's like to have a hard day. I really have been there. We were able to survive through that lawsuit and end up building the business to the point where we had clients in 14 different countries, and eventually we're able to sell that. Selling the company is a whole nother story, take its own webinar, but great experience. And I've spent most of my time as a coach, mentor, investor to other entrepreneurs. Once as running an executive director of a nonprofit, The Creative Coast, out of Savannah, Georgia, and another time as in a for-profit organization called Forbes Books. You're familiar with that brand, I'm sure. And so those were two different kinds of really neat experiences, but gave me a broad range of people from whom I could learn about their business, and two different levels. One was very idea stage, and another was sort of a $10 to $50 million company that we would work with and serve, and different sets of challenges. So at this point, I am publishing a book. It's called What Harvard Taught Me, but My Kids Made Me Learn. I talked a little bit about why I came up with that idea, and I'm so excited that you're a part of this first webinar. The book shall be out by the end of this year, and there's a website that we have up, and you can be a part of that or join the mailing list if that's something you would like to do. I have the blessing of being an Aspen Institute Fellow. It's perhaps given me more, at least as much as even attending Harvard. This is a really impactful group. At the end of this month, I'll go to the annual trek out to the Aspen Institute. And for me, I concentrate a lot of my energies in entrepreneurship there, but it is really all about impact and the legacy that we leave in our world and in our community. So I feel very grateful to have that support group. These smiley bugaboos you see are my 3 children and my greatest joy. And again, what I've learned when I review, how did I learn this? It was always because I was a mom. So what types of lessons will we cover today? There's a wide variety. Variety. We'll be talking about communicating. We'll be talking about listening. Of course, that's part of communicating, but it's worth setting it out on its own so that we make sure we pay close attention to what it takes to listen. Focus, alignment, strategy, and a few more sprinkles in there. Who is here? What a thrill it is to me that we are working with quite a number of people. I've already had some incredible feedback from this morning, and how fun to get emails from India, from New Zealand, from Budapest, from various states. And so it's really just a delight to be able to communicate with people and to learn from some of their challenges and questions. And so today we do actually have men and women. We have people that are in their 20-somethings all the way up to their 80s. We have business leaders as well as stay-at-home parents. I've mentioned that this afternoon we have 4 different countries. We had about the same this morning, and several states. Many people are actual entrepreneurs, and there's certainly you. And you may fit one of those categories, certainly your age. If you're out of that age range, please send me a little note and let me know. But I really am excited that you're here and look forward to your feedback. Why are we talking about what Harvard taught me, but my kids made me learn? I talked a little bit about where I think I received my skills, but I also wanted to share with you sort of a passion, is that if just one person hears this message and says, gosh, I'm that much more motivated to go back to work. I'm that much less intimidated to step back in. I feel that much more empowered or able to translate my experiences either with my children or with their children's community active groups, or with the way I've been able to think through some parenting challenges or communication challenges, and I'm going to parlay them into business. That would really excite me. The same thing is true on a hiring side, that if there's one HR executive that discounts time away a little less and builds in learning or understands some of the learning that can happen in a different environment, then I'm really excited. So I've already mentioned how excited I am to have both men and women, and I want to be all sort of on the same team, but it's worth pointing out two different things here. One is that in my experience, when men come to the business table and talk about their families and their children, they gain credibility. And unfortunately, to much of my experience to date, when women come to a business table and they talk about their children, to some degree, it's discounted. I'm not trying to discourage anyone at all. I'm trying to call out something that I've learned from experience. Now, of course, I'm not shy about sharing that I have children, but I am quite careful to be clear on my accomplishments, my goals, achieving those goals, setting milestones, keeping my eye on them, so that there's no room for someone to misinterpret that because I coached a soccer team or was involved in a dance activity or sat on a board for something for my children, that adds to my business success and doesn't detract. And sometimes I have to connect those dots for people. And so I just put it out there so that I find that when things are called out and articulated, the problem diminishes. And I hope that this conversation, one of the reasons I want to have this conversation, is so we can minimize those gaps between the way certain people are treated and understood, and that we can recognize that diverse perspectives and diverse people and diverse experiences make much, much stronger companies and communities. So now is a great time to build that momentum. So I mentioned Sheryl Sandberg because in her first book, Lean In, Sheryl Sandberg introduced a concept which I am going to call the jungle gym concept, where she dismisses the idea that career growth is about a ladder, a linear path, that we just go one rung up and down, or just up, hopefully, the corporate ladder. And what she said is that today's career paths are more like a jungle gym. They go a little left, a little right, that wherever you find yourself, there are people and networks and experiences and skills that you can be growing as you're in that spot on the jungle gym. And one of my goals, one of my why for why we have this conversation, is to validate that parenthood is an important place in the jungle gym of your career. So let's talk about what is the Millennial Women's Network. The millennialwomen.net is a place that I hope you will visit. You might become a member. Maybe you've enjoyed this webinar. You might want to sign up for some of our others. There's a Facebook group. It is basically a place for support, connection, content, webinars, mentoring, and conversation. I am incredibly excited that we have brought together women from, I believe now, 24 different countries. And it's been super fun to watch conversations between someone in Jamaica talking about hiring challenges and how that might be different from someone in Brussels. And so, um, mostly we have young women here, mostly who are looking to launch a company. To date, many of them have just ideas that they are, and they're honing skills at a full-time job where they're working for someone else. There are lots of questions about balancing home and family and work. And so we welcome you to be a part of that. And we welcome you as a mentor if you're not defined as a millennial, if that's something you would like to contribute to. But taking this generation that is so large, so powerful, so impactful, so passionate, and being able to contribute and to grow is a joy for me. And so I welcome you to get engaged. So I just talked to you a little bit about where did my skills come from, this idea that they came from parenting. But I want to share with you a kind of funny story, and this picture reminds me. I took on a consulting arrangement to help a fast growing company that was at about $10 million. This was going to be a long-term engagement. I'm still quite connected to the company. And they had set out the goal to be $100 million company. And so there were all sorts of new relationships that had to be tapped. There was different sales channels. There was a new way we were thinking about organizing the company. Mostly it was increasing share of wallet. So we were to add really triple or quadruple the types and number of products while we were increasing the value to get to those high growth rates. Anyway, a big challenge, long-term challenge. And it started kind of quickly, so I kind of left town. My children were staying with my sister at the time. School was just about to get started, and I just took off and went to my first 3 days. It was pretty intense, 12, 14-hour days. And on my way back to connect with my children after the first 3 days, I got to see my daughter, who had a brand new driver's permit. So she was so excited to drive me to our destination for that evening, which was 45 minutes away. And I get in the passenger seat and she gets in the driver's seat. And she's really a go-getter, this one. And she has the car in reverse and then puts it back into park. And then she looks over at me and she says, "So, Mom, you were going to work in this company. They're $10 million. You plan to bring them to $100 million. You've been there for 3 days. Did you get to 11 yet?" And right then I knew that not only are our children and our loved ones the one that teach us so much about people skills and about growth, but they are the ones that set the bar for us. And so how important it is to surround ourselves with people who have high expectations of ourselves, but also accept us where we are and love us. And I hope that you are now smiling like the woman I showed you earlier, that this is a little go-getter I have, or a big go-getter I have living in my house. We did not get to 11 million in the first 3 days, but the company is now at about 38. So I'm real proud to be a part of their success. So let's get started and start to walk through some of these business and entrepreneurial insights. The first that I want to share with you is my very favorite word, and the word is lagniappe. This is a French New Orleans word that not only sounds fun and has a pretty neat spelling, but lagniappe has a really great meaning. Lagniappe is a little something extra. It's about giving a little something extra. And my understanding of its history in New Orleans is that as the wheat was coming down the Mississippi River and getting to sort of its last stop, a bushel might be sold for $1. And so was whatever the typical rate was. But there were people who would sell the bushel and then give you a little something extra, hand you a little extra, hand you a little more, give you more. And so that was this bond. This lagniappe was the bond where you thought, well, I want to go back to that person. They're always giving me a little extra. They're always exceeding my expectation. And so as a business person, I will share with you that going deeper has always meant more in my success than going wider. That going a little bit deeper in a conversation, even in an email, making that extra effort to build a relationship, to think of a way to connect with this person, to make the email personal, to study the bio on LinkedIn long enough that I can find a town where maybe we intersected, a company that either I've worked at or someone I know has worked at, a contact that we share, a passion that ignites us both. That those kinds of authenticity, relationship builders, that little bit extra has always paid multiple folds to long-term growth relationships. And so I encourage you to always go that little extra. In my view, it's better to go deeper with the person you already know than to go wider to the next person that you might get to know. Same with customer service. So once you're lucky enough to have a client, I'm sure you've read the studies on how much harder it is to gain a new client than to keep an old one. So we're going to talk more about listening and strategy, and I already mentioned the phrase share of wallet, but building relationships with existing customers is done often through exceeding expectations. Sometimes that means being clear on what expectations are and what you expect to deliver, always under promising and over delivering, which you may not be able to do if you're kind of vague about what one can expect. But if you can go that little extra, that lanyard, I am confident that you'll hold on to those customers longer. The referrals will come in, the relationships will build, the efficiencies and delivery will happen, and that builds great businesses. So, of course, it's no surprise that the same thing is true in our homes. And I really found this lesson as I was able to meet my children where their needs were and go that extra mile. Sometimes it could be as early as, studying spelling words. My children have been able to accomplish a great deal in their academic career so far, but kindergarten and first grade, it wasn't always like that. We had these list of words that they were told they had to spell by the end of the week, and it just didn't happen for them early on. And so we went the little extra mile, and that might have been that I would read them out loud. But what I always found actually was that didn't work. And so we would create these word find games where whatever the word was, we had to turn into something fun because we didn't want it to feel too much like studying in those early days. We would do a word scramble, and we would play with words where you mix up the letters and see if you could spell another word. And so, pardon me, what I found early on was if I could go that little extra mile, now my kids don't even remember that, but they had an advocate in what they were trying to achieve early on, and they knew that learning could become fun. And so that was a chance for us to grow and share that time. And it was really all the beginning of that lanyard. Another important lesson is repeat your story. My father-in-law, on the very day that my daughter was born, told me that parenting is hard, and the most important reason for him was that you never know when you're making a difference. You tell your story, you set your expectation, and then you repeat your story, and you hope that someone hears you. And for him, that was about holding the door open. It was important to him that he raised children, and particularly sons, that would hold the door open at the grocery store and for the next person. And he told me the story literally the day I became a parent. And he said, I did it at age 7 and 8 and 9 and 10. And it wasn't until about 11, 12, and 13 when all of a sudden I just opened my eyes one day and there he was, my son was holding the door open. And I never lost that because I know sometimes I can get frustrated, sounding like a broken record. Am I just telling the same old story again and again and again? And I find that repeating our story is so important to the vision setting. as the leader of a company, as the head of a household, it is our job to set out our vision. What kind of organization are we running? What are the goals that we have this year? Who plays what part in those goals? What are the milestones that we're going to be achieving? And the best way for businesses to, in quotes, repeat that story is to have a basic a cadence for those meetings and a cadence for testing those milestones and an understanding for, what are the rhythms? How often are we meeting together? How often are we measuring? What's a success look like? Are we breaking this milestone down into amounts of effort, how many times we make phone calls, or how many times we get people on the phone? Is it, what kind of are they results? Is it a number, or is it a percentage of success? And those are all part of the vision setting, but the repeating of the story, the revisiting of those goals, the understanding the milestone, and then it's broadcasting, saying, hey, these are what the goals were in the marketing department. Look at how we're performing against those goals. That's really all about repeating our story, and it's not that different than what you find in a household as a parent, that we are the kind of house that sets whatever health goals, exercise goals, nutrition goals, study goals, and repeating the story is a lot about going back to that accountability. I've noted here one story that was of particular importance to me, and that was when we were at a professional golf outing, and it was busy and a little bit hectic, and I had one kind of maybe first grader, so he needed a lot of help and needed some eyes on him, and the other children were a little bit older, still in grade school, but I needed to go spend some time with my parents, and it was such a thrill to turn back. I have this one vision of the not one but two older children helping the younger with it was like a putting game, and I was so excited because they were living into the vision of helping one another out and helping one another achieve their goals. So that was a great experience for me. So I don't know if any of you are about at dinner time, but this picture is about a fancy dessert, and it really was a great evening. But I share it with you because it helps me introduce a conversation about alignment. Alignment is so important when we're talking about teams and making sure that our incentives are aligned, our goals are aligned, that we don't have one group, i.e. marketing, chasing after a number of leads but not caring about quality of leads, for example, while we have another group, i.e. sales, that is frustrated with the quality. So alignment is very, very critical. So this is a conversation I wanted to share, and I kind of want to dive a little bit deeper. And most of today is about what Harvard taught me, but my kids made me learn. And on this slide, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about a book that's coming out next year, and it is called Can't Make This Bleep Up: Big Mistakes Real Companies Make. So I'm actually going to dive into a story because I think maybe you can learn a little bit, or I'd love to share, and I'll learn when I talk about it, where I saw a company that was out of alignment. And in this company, we had hired a person who was put him in a very senior position. This person's last 15 years of experience had been literally selling a $2 to an $8 dessert. Now he's in a position to oversee operations connected to a $200,000 contract. Now ask yourself if that makes sense. Let me show you how and why that rolled out. So did it make sense? Maybe. He was senior, he knew about sales, he knew a little bit about people, and he knew about processes. But let's talk about things like sales cycle. So I asked him, I said, do you know the sales cycle for this $200,000 contract? And what was so shocking was that not only did he not know it, which by the way, was about 4 months, he had never thought to ask it. Because if you're working on a sales cycle of a dessert, you got it. It's at best through dinner, but for the most part, it's 5 minutes. It's when someone comes up and says, hey, it's time for dessert. Have you been thinking about it? Maybe you planted the seed the hour early, but it's not a 4 minute, I'm sorry, it's not a 4 month conversation. So that's one thing. And so not only had this gentleman never thought about, well, what is a sales cycle in the contract? How are we going to move these leads from first contact through the 4 steps of bringing them into the fold, selling them what we call them a mini sale, a $5,000 sale, to moving them up to the $200,000 sale and a long-term relationship. But also, how does that impact sales commissions and sales incentives all along the way, and the transfer from marketing to sales? So I put that out there because my guess is somewhere in your organization, there may be something that is off kilter with alignment. And so that example is one I wanted to offer, is that this individual, so well experienced with the $8 dessert, made at least that mistake in the $200,000 contract. But to take it a little bit further, I'll just pick on him a little bit longer and share with you that not only was he not thinking about sales cycle, he hadn't thought about payment terms and payment cycle. And so I'm sure you can imagine an $8 dessert is paid at the time before the ice cream, or maybe just as the ice cream is melted. It's paid immediately, or at least the credit card is given immediately. You may not pay it for a month or whenever your credit card bill comes due. A $200,000 contract, however, in this situation was an 18-month cycle. So again, if you're out of alignment, your history, your skill set, your ability may not make great decisions about pay, incentive, compensation. And in this case, there was someone making these decisions, setting commission rates, setting commission shares, setting referrals, number of leads, etc., basing it on a immediate payment, when in reality, in this case, it was an 18-month payment cycle. So sounds really obvious, and one of the reasons I love that book and those stories, Can't Make This Bleep Up, is so often I watch it all day long. I hear it in politics. Hey, we should run governments like we run business. And I think, are you kidding? We run business terribly. We make tons of mistakes. I see lots and lots of crazy mistakes in business all day long. And this forum doesn't offer me the opportunity to speak in detail about all of those things. We just don't have time to dive into it. That'll be another webinar. But it is important to ask why. Why do we make these mistakes? And the thing that I want to tie this back to with what Harvard taught me, my kids made me learn, is that it always comes down to people skills. So again, I'm going to go back to Mr. Dessert and share with you, how on earth could a smart CEO hire in this senior person who was making these blatant mistakes? And the reason was insecurity. There was a young CEO who wanted the validation that he could hire someone, the prestige. He wanted the chance to impress his peers. He wanted that validation that he hired someone from a public company. And so we brought him in, even though he was making terrible mistakes within his company. And so that's like a core emotional, I'll call it a weakness. It's funny, I just watched, I think it's called The Greatest Show, this movie, and a whole parallel of the decisions that Barnum had made so that he could be validated. He had sort of a hole in his self-concept and heart. And I watch mistake after mistake after mistake in business be made from similar types of emotional drivers, which is why, again, people skills, communication skills, in the end, are the most important things that will lead to you to business, financial, call it spreadsheet success. So to kind of bring this slide and conversation about alignment together, I will just share with you one fun message that my son gave me one day. And he just said, Mom, if they ride horses, why do we call them cowboys? I mean, don't you just love children and their perspectives? And I really kept that phrase on my desk because it helped me to remember how we sometimes assign people to the wrong jobs, we make the wrong assumptions. Reminds me to laugh, reminds me that the new and fresh perspective is oftentimes one of the most insightful. So I wanted to offer you that sentence. And lastly, I'll just make a comment that so often our culture is opposed to our calling. Our mission is not in alignment with where we might find ourselves. And so, if that is happening, there will be confusion. So, when it comes to business, aligning yourself with your core values of your organization can really make or break your experience, and figuring out early what those core values are for yourself and figuring out what they are for your company, your organization, setting them, I think, will lead to a lot of happiness. And it breaks it down to the minute decisions. I was consulting with a company recently, a pretty new company. They're looking to start franchising. They sell these acai bowls, great healthy food. It's about a $10 snack, basically. And I was asking them questions about the return on their investment in energy and how much money they spend on electricity. And what was so interesting was he said, we're not thinking about the return on the investment of buying the more expensive washer and dishwasher. And he went through some of the equipment he has. He said, for us, it's all about the mission. We think there's one planet, and we live our lives and we sell our products and we engage with people in a way that comes from a place of mission, and we attract employees from that place. We make decisions about our recyclable containers from that place. We put the ingredients in our products and our meals from that place, and that's how we choose our franchise partners. And that was a great lesson kind of coming home for me, how important aligning your culture with your calling so that you can avoid that.